The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at www.mtsu.edu/CEM. Welcome to Middle Tennessee State University ELL Collaborative Summer Academy. We're about to start our last session for the day. And today we welcome Miss Emily Bruner, who is the ELL Program Coordinator in Anderson County Schools. Ms. Bruner's been recommended to us because of her great work with data. And so I know that that is a topic that administrators who are in the audience today have a great interest in data. So this will be a great session. Ms. Bruner, thank you for being here today, and please take the floor.
Thank you. Well, I have to say it is so wonderful to be back in Tennessee. I started my career in Tennessee, in Putnam County. I was there, I think, when Alice was coming in and I was leaving. At that time, there were just a few ESL teachers, and then coming back, 20 years later, it's amazing. I've been an ESL specialist in states around Tennessee, and we've all looked across the border, just very envious with all the things that the Tennessee Department of Education has done for English learners here in the state. So it was such a blessing to be able to get to come back and be part of it. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you how we are connecting the dots in Anderson County and how that we have created a platform for authentic data and systematic growth in our district. So for us, in our program, we take a three-part approach. First of all, we look at how we can discover, right? So we take an assets-based approach to discover the strengths of our learners. This is really one of our foundational pieces. Secondly, in our support is that we create networks of scaffolding for students and for families. So we have a lot of new immigrant families that may need more levels of supports within our community, and some families that may need minimal or maybe just have that question of, where do I go to fill out a TennCare application? So those all definitely vary, but we keep those networks in place for our families. Finally, our TEACH, that's our systematic English language development. When I began to think about a name for this, the first things that really stuck out to me was, what we are doing is systematic, because I wanted us to have a common methodology that we were all engaging in as an ESL team in our district. But I also wanted it to be genuine, because the ESL specialist, you're trying to run down monitoring forms and you're trying to update goals. And what we've been doing this every 4.5 weeks. And when, I'm a task analysis person. I like to go, okay, we have this thing that we're going to do. How many hours is it going to take us to do this, right? It's a lot of work when you're doing this. If you're really doing this every 4.5 weeks. So what I found is that maybe I had some folks that were doing it some of the time and some folks that were drowning in it. We knew that our secondary in our middle school, there was just, each kid had 6 teachers. And we're trying to make sure that we're getting these monitoring forms back. It's a lot. So what I wanted to do is to be able to take all of this and really to begin to look at this monitoring piece as data and actionable data, and find a place to sort of bring all of this together. So this isn't just one of those other things that we have to do, and it's not just a housekeeping thing that we have to do, but this is a place where we're really bringing all of our data together. And one thing that I do want to just make sure that we know is that these dots that we're going to see in this data is just really not reflective of the entire picture of our students, right? So we are very, very conscious about that when we're having our data talks in our PLCs. But the data begins to tell this story, right, about the linguistic strengths of our learners. So we had a couple of guiding questions that we used along the way. So first of all, in our PLC groups, just thinking it kind of in our Discover quadrant was, what are the assets that our students are bringing to the classroom in our school community, right? So we have a cohort of students that are coming to us. Parents are working in a factory, highly educated. They're coming from a state in northern Mexico. The kids have been at school. They're coming in with this incredible academic vocabulary, academic experiences. You wouldn't believe the credits that they're bringing in, and so they're bringing in these linguistic resources in the L1. And guess what's happening? That's lifting up everybody in that classroom, right? But we also have students that may not have had those educational experiences, but they also are bringing so many things with them that we might even have to dig in just a little bit further to develop. And I'll give you a good example. We had a student, and she had crossed the border by herself as a middle schooler, and came in, was really quiet for years. She was one of those students who was just like, it was really, really difficult to get her to open up. There was a lot of trauma. When we designed a unit using culturally responsive bilingual literature, and particularly within poetry, something changed in her. She began writing, and she began writing a lot. And our ESL teacher really took notice of her writer's notebook and said, what, I really think this is really good. And so we were like, okay, let's go. One of our other ESL teachers he's a writer on the side. And so we're like, would you take a look at this? Like, I really think now, I'm not an expert, but like, I really think this is really good. And he was like, this is amazing. This is better than what I'm seeing. Let's get it published. And so together, these two ESL teachers worked together and submitted it to a Latinx literary journal, and she was published. And it took a little bit of digging to find that asset within her in this fire that started. So this is something as a team that we're really conscious of, and just the miracles that can happen. We might have to dig in a little bit deeper. Our second question that we use in PLC is, where do I need to nurture linguistic growth? Right, and that's going to change, right? The data that we're looking at in August is old. It's old, it's 6 months old, right? And this is going to change throughout the year because language and linguistic development is dynamic and it's not linear. So I need to know where I need to nurture this growth now, but a month from now I need to know. And the next month I need to know, because it's going to change and it's going to look different in different content areas. And finally, in our teach, how does this change my instructional practices with my learners in my classroom, right? So those are the three questions that we're using when we're coming together to look at our data. So I'm going to start with just a little data story about our program. So we have 144 multilingual learners that we served last year. Now, you might be in a program that has 12 kids. You might be in a program that has 4,000 kids. And I just want to say this, that each district has their own unique set of challenges. So just because you have 12 kids doesn't mean that this is so much easier than the district that has 4,000, because you are dealing with a set of challenges that's very, very different than theirs. And in my years, I've been in this business for almost 25 years, and I've worked in 4 states, and I've worked in rural districts and suburban districts. I've worked in affluent and poor districts. I've been all over the place, and I know that each district is very unique, right? And we all have our own set of challenges. In our district, when I first came, the prior year, we had tested 13 kids with access. So we have seen an immense amount of growth in the last 4 years. We have 200 students with a non-English language background, and 95% of our students speak Spanish. And we have 15 languages within the district. Many of our families that we are bilingual speak Spanish and then also speak a Mayan language as well. We have 11.7% of our multilingual learners have interrupted schooling experiences. Some of those interruptions are shorter than others. Some of them, the students may have gone to school for just a few months. We have 18.7% of our multilingual learners are experienced multilingual learners or long-term English learners. So we really are starting to really kind of focus there. We want to make sure that we're going to help those kids meet growth. Those guys are born in middle school, right? So our secondary, we have a little bit of a different focus than in our elementary. But one of the things that we're really seeing is this increasing population of unaccompanied youth, right? So these are kids, they've crossed over by themselves. Many of those kids have walked or traveled by themselves to get to the border, have made that crossing by themselves. They've been picked up by an INS officer. They've gone to a detention center. They've stayed there until they could be connected with a guardian. You know, many times this is not a parent. Many times this is somebody they don't even know. Let that just resonate. We had one student that was placed with a guardian, a family member that was 22, she was 17, and they had never met. So lots of challenges there, kids coming in with lots of experiences and lots of trauma. But one of the things in our PLCs that we've identified is that this group of kids has a really high level of resiliency. So even though they've all kind of got these things that have happened and these scars and these bags of rocks from the things that have occurred, they have this high level of resiliency that we don't see so much in some of our other groups. So that's really been something we've been able to tap into, right? And those kiddos have lifted these other kids, right, that are coming in with these really rich educational backgrounds. So in fiscal year 21-22, we saw a 53.1% increase in our EL population. And let me tell you, it was like right in the mid-year. So here we are scrambling to find other ESL teachers, and you know what that's like in the middle of the year. And you're gonna see my real data. Now I'm not gonna show you data from every one of our schools because some of it's like, you know, looks really great and some of it we just have a few kids and it's not really gonna tell an accurate data story. But I'm gonna show you the 3 schools that are our workhorse schools. Like this is where our kids are, this is where boots are on the ground, this is where we're in the trenches, okay? So we are struggling. We're struggling. And one of the things that we realized that we really absolutely had to know what our kids know. So we're entering this last year, we were not happy with our access scores. And we said, okay, we need to know what our kids know in content, which we're doing a pretty good job with that with our benchmark testing, right? We're kind of getting that data. But we also need to know what they know in language, right? And it can't just be the annual access score that I'm getting that's 6 months old. Or that I know that this kiddo that's been in US schools for 9 years and he gets a 1.9 on speaking, that's not an accurate score for this guy, right? So I need to know what he knows. And I need to know what scaffolds need to be in place. And more importantly, I need to know where they need to be removed, okay? And that can happen lots of different times throughout the year. It's not that we're writing that ILP, right, in August, and then, hey, we've got it written. But going back and really being able to look at it. But we needed some actionable data that we felt confident in. Now, you know, knowing that language development is a fluid process, I wanted to be able to have something that we could administer through the year, okay? Now, a few need to knows, and probably a lot of you all are in the ESL world and you are familiar with this, with the Tennessee English Language Growth Standard. But as the students move up in proficiency, right, the standard decreases, okay? So, and this is the way that I see this. I'm a real visual person. When I was a kid, I used to have a snow cone stand in front of my dad's grocery store. So in 1982, I was making 50 cents a snow cone, and I'd sell them all day. I was like the wealthiest 10-year-old in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. But one thing that I knew, just from my experience as a professional snow cone maker, when you put in that first squirt of syrup, it goes up really, really quickly, right? It doesn't take as much to be able to move it up. And that's what we're seeing here. We look at our kids here at a 1.0, and they have to make a 1.3 growth that year, right? But the language isn't as complex. See, but as they move up, the language becomes so much more complex, and it takes a lot more to be able to move the level up. And this is where we see our kids get stuck. Our goal is growth. I tell my teachers I'm not concerned about how many kids we test out this year. That's not what I'm concerned about. Because if they're making growth, they're going to test out when they're supposed to. And that's really important. I've got teachers that'll get teary and they're like, I didn't test out. That's not our goal. Our goal is growth, right? And one of the things that I know that our kids need to have accurate scores is they need practice. And I'm definitely not advocating lots of, test prep and like getting kids stressed out. However, we all know what that speaking test looks like, right? So if your students are only putting on these headphones in February, right before testing, and they're sitting down to take their access test, and we're putting this on their heads, and they're sitting down, and this is what it looks like, and this is the first time they've done this, we're not going to get an accurate score. They need a lot of practice with this. And I'm going to take it a step further. We need practice with this. So, I'm going to leave everybody with a challenge. Go home and do this yourself. And I've got the links. If those of you that don't know how to get to the practice items, they're out there. They're for free. They're not in the secure site. But get on there and do those practice items yourself. And then debrief it. How did this make me feel, right? What strategies did I use? How would I do it different next time, right? Oh, I definitely want to know what I'm going to say before I hit the record button, because I'm just going, and then time's up. Because those of you that haven't seen it, not only do they have to put this on, it's got a countdown timer. Now imagine if somebody put that in front of you in Japanese. I wouldn't be able to do anything. If you give it to me in Spanish is my second language, but you know what? My verbs, I would really have to stop and think about it. So really, really important. Practice that and see what it's like yourself. Do it with your ESL teachers. Do it with your classroom teachers. Like, your classroom teachers really don't know what they're doing, right? They just know that they're going to have to go take this test, and the ESL teacher's going to come pick them up, and they're going to go and come back. When they see, oh, this is why academic conversations are really important in the classroom, right? This is why language frames matter, because these are the kinds of tasks that they're going to have to do, and they're not going to do it anywhere else except with their ESL specialist. Now, I will say that we have many schools and teachers that are using Flip, which is wonderful, right? And in our team, we were really utilizing Flip. We were coming together, we were creating like common speaking prompts. But it was really tough to get those aligned, to get the scoring right. We needed something that was a little bit more than that. So we still are using Flip, but we're also bringing in some other things as well. So the progress monitoring of academics, I want to touch on that, because this kind of is like one of those housekeeping things, and those of us have been using Elevation, we know we send these out, and then we get them back, and then, we're just trying to get them back, and then before we know it, the next 4 weeks is here, and it's like your teachers are getting snowed under with all of this. But I wanted to change the mindset of progress monitoring with academics, because it is so important, in addition to just looking at their grades on your SIS, right? Their grades are important, and like we do weekly check-ins, but you may have teachers that don't put their grades in until just a few days before the report card, and we've gone, from a C to a D, right? So we need some other ways to be able to look and know before we get to those critical times. Progress monitoring of academics is crucial for your high school graduation rates, and particularly if you're on block scheduling. If you're on block scheduling, at the end of that first 9 weeks, that's half a year in a traditional calendar. It's hard to recover, right? It's hard to recover from that point. Also, if you have your itinerant teachers, right, and they don't have any common planning time, that progress monitoring is really crucial for them, right? Not only on top of that, right, it is a federal requirement. Now, we get to go to every 9 weeks. For us, but at our high schools that are on block schedule, we're going to still continue to progress monitor every 4. But this is a very labor-intensive process, and it's not planning. This is not instructional planning, right? And so what I wanted to do was to create space during PLC time that we could do these tasks in a very organized fashion, right? This isn't housekeeping. This is important data, and we need to read it, and we need to take action upon that, okay? So that was something that was a big, important piece moving into this project. Also, for us, we needed a way to progress monitor language, okay? And I hadn't found one that I loved, but there was one I had used in the past called the Pearson TELL. The Pearson TELL, it stands for the Test of English Language Learning. And I'm going to just show you this because I'm a visual person and I need to be able to see it. I can tell you about it all day. But the Pearson TELL was an assessment that we started implementing when I was in Lexington. I was working with refugees. And at that time, you had to use it on an iPad. Had to be on a tablet. Right? And so I wrote a grant, we got tablets, it was really great. It came to Tennessee, we didn't have iPads. But they came out with an app to use it on the touchscreen Chromebook. So I was like, oh, this is gonna be wonderful. So I'm gonna show you just a few pictures of what it looks like so that you can kind of see. So everything is like on a touchscreen. There are different content areas, so it's language of science and social studies, math, language arts. For some of these, I'm just going to scroll down here real quick, you can see that they have tasks where they have to retell a story, right? And so it's recording. They have for the early literacy, they actually use their finger to do some of the writing. They have some additional pieces that really kind of go into a little bit more of content area. You can see a close exercise here. Kids absolutely love this. So this one item here is a drag and drop. The prompt might be drag the green crayon and put it on the table, right? Our kids love this. So what I was looking for is something that was low stress. And that's something that, is really important to me. I'm all about productive assessment. Like I started in teaching before No Child Left Behind, and I remember the days you go in and the English learner would be in the back of the room playing with a bucket of Legos because they didn't know English yet. After No Child Left Behind, that changed. All of a sudden, kids are a priority. Like, oh, who are these? And what are ELs? And oh, well, we're getting data on them. And now there's accountability with it, right? And so it gave us a lot of strength. But I'm also very mindful. I want to make sure that the assessments that we're doing are appropriate and they're needed and that we're actually going to use that data. Because if we're not, I don't want to do it. Kids take a lot of tests. Now, one thing that it provides, the TELL provides, is the beginning of the year and an end of the year diagnostic. And it's about 50 minutes, 55 minutes. So it's a little bit longer. But the progress monitoring is about 20 to 25 minutes. And so you saw how fun these prompts are. I mean, like a lot of, especially the littles, like they don't even realize that they're testing. But it's something that we are able to give them to be able to look at longitudinal data over time through the year, and it will also do it year to year as well. I wanted something that was quick. I wanted something that was low stress, right? I don't want this to be like boot camp for access. That's not what this is. But I also wanted something that was just low stress and something kids could get excited about. Because I'm going to tell you, our experienced multilingual learners, our LTELs, they want to get out of ESL, and they don't know how to. They're in 10th grade, and they're tired of it, right? And I feel for them. I get it. And so what we want to do is help those kids really feel empowered. Like, oh, I'm growing, I'm getting better. And really saying and explaining to them about, like, this is what your growth goal is. Another thing about TEL is that it is auto-scored. So, and I can't explain how. I was telling you about like the magical multisensory phonics. This is kind of this magic thing. And you can get it and you can read about it, and there's a great explanation and all the technical manual. But it is auto-scored within just about 2 minutes. So it's really wonderful. After you administer this with your students, they're like, do you have my score yet? Can I see my score? Right? Because they're doing this every month. Another thing that I love about TEL is that there's a parent report that's available, and it's available in English, Spanish, and Chinese. Right now they're working on some other languages, but this is authentic ESL progress reporting to parents. Now I know, like, for years, like, I would do these like little progress reports where I'd have like a little check, like they're making progress or great progress or not progressing, and I never really felt like I was giving the parents like really accurate information. This gives them accurate information. Our parents know, and we've worked with our parents so that they can understand. It's very simple. And then if we have a student that, let's say, doesn't do so well on progress monitoring number 3, you always contact the parents and let them know, like, hey, they didn't have they didn't have a good testing day. It's nothing to worry about. So we just try to let the parents know it's okay, right? Also that, they may have had a task that was something new for them. One of the things I think that might be the most powerful is that TEL gives you a predictive score for access. So it's going to say, like, if the student took access today, then they are going to score this scale score, right? So what we're trying to do is eliminate this element of surprise that we get in May, and we're just like, yeah, our scores are coming back, then you're like, oh, we didn't make it. Right, but he looks so good throughout the year, and so this is what we're trying to eliminate, is this element of surprise that we're getting. So I was thinking about, okay, so where to begin? I know I want to do TEL. I want to bring this in with my team into PLC. The very first thing that I did was to develop a progress monitoring calendar. So this was really important for us, and I'll show you what it looked like. We had the progress monitoring for academics, progress monitoring listed in here. And so we always meet for PLC on Wednesday. So our students actually leave early on Wednesday so that we can have PLC. So our PLCs are on Wednesday. Our team would get together, and so we would assign the progress monitoring to the teachers the week before it was due. Okay, so they would get to do that during PLC. So they're not doing this during their planning time. They're doing this during this chunk of time. We take the first 30 minutes for them to kind of take care of this piece. The second day, the next week, when it's due, the teachers that didn't have it in elevation, we would send the reminder, right? So that's all the ESL teachers have to do that day, is just send the reminder. Very, very quick. The following week, when we come back, when we have this group of folks that we know that we're always going to have folks that don't get them in, right? The only thing my ESL teachers have to do that day is send me a friendly email with a list of teachers that I can forward to their building principal, and that's friendly enough that that building principal can send it out to those folks, right? And so my principals knew it. Like, I trained everybody in our administrators workshop in the summer. I said, you're going to be getting this, and this is why. But I want to make it really simple, because our building principals have a lot on their plate. Right? So I want it to be able to go, okay, I've got, these 7 people didn't get it. I can forward it to that high school principal, and he can forward it to those people, and there we go. Because my ESL teachers can't make them do it, right? And they were worried about it. They're like, I keep sending these emails to Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so. They're not getting their progress monitoring in. I said, you're done at this point. After you send it to me, then that ball is in my court and your building principal's court. So that was one thing that we were able to take off kind of that stress and getting that program calendar in. Another thing that we did was we also put in all of our progress monitoring dates so that those were listed in our calendar. So one of the things that we did was within that week, even though it was listed on a Wednesday, they really had that whole week that they could give that progress monitoring piece. And so this really just kind of helped us get our year organized. Everybody was able to see, like, this is when we're doing transitional monitoring, this is when we're doing the academic monitoring, and when we are going to be giving the benchmarks. For us also was building a culture of support in our PLC, right? Because in our platform, everybody can see everybody's data, right? It's visible data. But for us in our district, it works because we share a lot of families, right? And we know the families. And he has got the older brother, and this ESL teacher has got the sister, and the elementary teacher's got the cousin. And we can really put a lot of pieces together about kids. Now, that might not work for your particular school district, right? It might be something within a building or within a cohort. But one of the things we had to do was really kind of develop this understanding that this is not a competition and that we're smarter together, right? This school on this side of the river looks completely different than this school. These kids won't say 2 words. These kids won't quit talking, right? We have every school is very, very different. And this is not a competition, but it's all about being able to come together and to help each other during our data talks, right? So really developing that culture of support. And then finally, I had to build this data platform. And I'm gonna show you what I did. So the way it's constructed is that we have a place for teachers to put in the student name, the grade level. They can indicate whether the student is an experienced multilingual. And then they have an area for their prior year access scale score and proficiency level. Notice that I included the Tennessee ELPA growth standards here, just so that we had all of the resources in one place. This is like, when my folks come in for PLC, I want them to be able just to open up and be able to get to work and go to that place in their mind and not have to be going to a lot of different places. We also have a coding key that I included, and then I put in all of our benchmarking and progress monitoring dates for the year. Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of hone in on where we began on this big wall, because you can see there's lots and lots of fields. But using last year's scale score and then their proficiency level and coming in with their growth standard, we were able to create their goals. So in our first PLC, this was our day 1 task, our teachers added the names, or you could use numbers, right? You could use initials, and then their grade levels. And they would go through and they would add in that experience multilingual or LTEL indicator, all right? Because we need to know who those kids are. And then they added in the access scale score and the proficiency overall score for the prior year. Now, for those of you that might not have seen a report, or maybe it's been a minute, when we look at here's a sample from WIDA. This is not a real student, but we are using the overall score. Here's the proficiency level, and here's the scale score, right? So we are normally talking about proficiency levels. Like, that makes sense to us. If you say, this student's a 3.2, we're like, gotcha. But if you say, oh, he's a scale score of a 318, we're like, not sure what that is. But for our progress monitoring, it was very important for us to be able to see that scale score, and I'll show you why. The next thing that we needed to do was to add those growth targets, and I went ahead and added in a function here so that it would go ahead and create the goal. I did not add any conditional formatting for it to automatically put in the target, because I wanted them to work with the data a little bit, right? I didn't want to make it just too easy, because then they're just looking at it. I know it sounds really mean, but this is like, I want my folks to learn how to really work with data, and I have a lot of new folks. So coming in and determining the proficiency level was in as a sum function. And I just, I kind of go back to this Confucius quote, if I see and I forget, I see and I remember, and I do and I understand. And so that was one of the things I really wanted them to work with that. But after they got in the goal, it added it up for them. Now, the next thing that was really tricky was trying to determine the access scale score goal, because we have to have these scale scores for it to really make sense with TELL. So let me show you why this was really tricky. From WIDA, we moved from proficiency level just at from a 2 to a 3 to a 4 to a 5. Well, if you're a 10th grader and your goal is a 2.8, what would the scale score be? Right? It's just you're just going to be guessing, right? And we're not going to really have, everybody's going to be kind of all over the place. So I decided I'm going to have to create something for us to use here, something a little bit more specific. So I knew that this one wasn't going to work for us. So what I did talk with WIDA just to get kind of some directives. And what I did was I went through and I just took the mean between each of the proficiency levels, and then I took it one more time. Now what I did not go any deeper than that. One is it became too messy. We were just getting into the weeds a little bit. Also, notice up at the top it says non-exact values are rounded up to the next proficiency level. So I wanted a way to be able to boost and just keep those goals a little bit high. I definitely, if I've got to go between high or low, I want the goal to be a little bit high, but I also want it to be attainable, right? And so I had to create this chart in order to be able to get this metric. When we see this scale score goal, that's where that's coming from, was from the chart that I created, okay? So once we got this is a lot, I know. Once we got the scale score goal, then we had to get a TELL goal, okay? So TELL has its own scoring. And it's really great because the kids really like the TELL score, right? It's something that they can really look at and understand. So TELL has concordance tables, and I'm not able to show you the whole thing, but I can show you kind of what it looks like. This right here gives you the estimate for the access. Here's the online, here's paper if you happen to have kids that need paper. But let's say that you have a second grader, your goal for that student for the scale score is a 233, then their TELL goal is a 201. So we went ahead and put both of those in. Now, most of our teachers have around 20 kids. I've got some that have a few more, but most of ours did. So we were able to get this task done in that first PLC. I think if they had more than that, we would probably have broken up into a couple of sessions. But once we got this piece in, we had the goal. And notice that next section is their beginning of the year score. So this particular student had a TELL goal of a 540. When he took the beginning of the year diagnostic, he had a 516, right? So, we've got some room for growth there. So we know if we can get to that 540, right, he should be meeting what he needs to meet on the access test. So kind of our next steps, we completed that beginning of the year assessment, and then we would update the goals using our goal bank. So it's going to give you scores for reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And then we could go into the goal bank and be able to put in real goals, either from our own formative data or from our goal bank. Now, we are still using key uses because I can't quite figure out how to make some of those new charts actionable from the new standards. So at this point, we're still using the key uses. But in our goal bank, our teachers could just get in here. Let's say that they were, a 912, and then let's say the student had a 3 in writing, then they could come in and capture the goals from here. But like I said, teachers didn't have to use this. They could use what the data, other data that they have for goals, because they know what their kids need. But this is really something that really helped us along the way for instruction. The next step was completing that first cycle of academic progress monitoring. So this was a cycle that we continued, but the next time it would be progress monitoring 1. So in the platform, we just put in check marks that this was completed. Okay, so we kept this really, really simple. Okay, and they could just go in there and click, and I'm not able to manipulate that because I'm on a view only, but as the progress monitoring was completed, and after they had taken action on that, they would check that. Now, I want to talk about taking action. This was what I asked my ESL teachers to do. If you had a flagged progress monitoring form, I wanted you to print it out, I wanted you to read it, and I wanted you just to jot down your response to that, a quick notation. Like, let's not write a book, let's not go in and create a spreadsheet on that document. If you have multiple, if you've got a student that has multiple teachers, you could print 2 per page, like you didn't have to have like a big stack. But if it was a flagged, I wanted to see what the response was. What was the action for that? So one of our questions was, is the student failing or at risk of failure? Right? If that one, I want that in the data notebook showing like what we did in response to that. If it wasn't flagged, don't print it off, right? The student's doing okay. So that's one of the things that we did, is I wanted to make sure, because what I saw when we first started with elevation is they were getting all these out, they were getting snowed under, and I'm like, are you reading them? Are we having time to really get in here and look at the data, right? If we have a teacher that's written a nice paragraph at the bottom about an upcoming unit, have we gone in there and really looked at that and taken action upon that? So anything that came back flagged, those were items that needed action, and those were the ones that they would print off. And then they would go ahead and they would click when their goals were updated. So it kind of helped everybody stay a little bit organized in this process. Remember, we're having to do this every 4.5 weeks, right, last year, right, up until now, right, that we're having to update goals, and we're having to do the progress monitoring. So for some of my folks, this is absolutely their jam. They love doing this kind of stuff. I've got other people like this might not be the thing that they're the best at. So it was a way to really help support my teachers in making sure that we were getting these tasks done. So what we did when we got to progress monitoring number 4, which was right at the beginning of February, like right before access, that was the predictive score that we took for access. So the kids knew, like, okay, this is the one that we're going to use, and we're going to see how accurate this is when our scores come back, right? So we would absolutely celebrate this. Now we had a few kids that didn't do so well on number 4. Maybe their higher score was in December, or maybe it was in November, and we celebrated those scores. It's okay. Like, it's absolutely fine. Which score did we want to celebrate today? But this was really, really exciting for them. Kids absolutely loved it, especially those experienced multilinguals, those long-term kids that have been in ESL. They feel like now, right, they're in the driver's seat a little bit. This isn't just a surprise that's going to happen to them. Be like, oh, I'm still in ESL. Yet another year, right? So progress monitoring 4 is the one that we used for the prediction. Now you could use the end of the year diagnostic there if you wanted to. I decided not to because I didn't want it to be stressful. They've been taking the progress monitoring. Let's keep it at 20 minutes. We're doing some other things to help them get ready and doing the sample items and those things with them. Now, our teachers were using lots of different goal setting and data collection methods with the kids. And that is something that we did not create a common methodology for. I wanted teachers to have a lot of freedom. I wanted them to be able to come in and share what was working, what they were doing with their kids. They were having them graph them in lots of different ways. And it looks very different in elementary than it does at high school. One of my high school teachers, he is the king of student conferencing. I've never seen anybody that can do this. He can manage a whole classroom and still like conference with all of his kids. It's absolutely amazing. The way that he was doing goal setting and data collection with his students and the way that kids were keeping up with their data looked really different than in other schools. So that was something that they had, you know, their own autonomy. The thing that we wanted the methodology for was the way that we were collecting data as a department, right? Because then we could sit down and we could have discussions about them. We could look at these students, we could say, I wonder why they're not growing here. What's happened with this student? Oh, okay, well, all of a sudden he perked up. Oh, well, soccer practice started, right? He's talking now, right? He's not so isolated. So this was something that was really great. Another shared methodology that we had were our data notebooks. Okay, and it's just super old-fashioned. I know that probably, I'm trying to think like when I first started keeping a data notebook way back when, but this was something that we all did. And one of the reasons that I wanted us to have this is one, there is no way that I can know the goals for each of my students when each of them have 4, and they may or may not be changing every 4.5 weeks. So if I'm really using that data to write lesson plans for them, I need them in an accessible place. So every student had a tab. Teachers would keep their current language goals in here. They would keep a copy of the ELP. So I didn't want it just as a digital version, I want it here, right, that we can get our hands on it. They also had their current TEL individual student report was kept in here, so that is cumulative over the years. So like once they got the new one, they could get rid of the old one and shred the old one. And then those flagged academic progress monitoring forms are in here. And that was really important for me because if I have a student that's all of a sudden failing and we have an issue, I need to be able to go back and say, what happened here during this time? And so once they had that down, had their notations, they were keeping them in here. So this was something that we all engaged in. Something that kind of helped us to begin to develop this as a practice was a self-assessment that we did after progress monitoring number 1. So it was very, very simple. You know, do I have, you know, the progress monitoring forms printed off? You know, do I have the individual student reports printed behind each tab? And they're very, very simple. I gave this to them a week ahead because I wanted everybody to be successful, right? For some of my folks, they love doing this. This is like right up their alley. They love it. And I mean, you wouldn't believe some of these like tabs and notebooks that they put together. Some of my folks, this organization piece is not come naturally to them. So, you know, they got this a week ahead. They were able to go through making sure that they were kind of getting those practices in place. And then we came back as a PLC and we talked about like what was working, what wasn't. And so, you know, like I had one teacher, it's like, oh, I forgot to get this done. So he could take the little bottom part. We had this kind of like it was a take-home page, like, oh, here's the things I need to remember to do. Again, just so that we have this common way that we're collecting data and that we're all engaged in these same processes. Another piece that we implemented was a program called Flashlight 360. So this just kind of came across an email for me last year, and I was like, whoa, what is this thing? And I'm going to show you what it looks like. This is designed for extended practice and coaching for expressive language. And one of the things that's really great about this is that you can develop speaking prompts, or you can use speaking prompts that are provided by the company. And students are able to practice these multiple times. So it's not a one and done. I love TEL, I love getting that data, but I don't have that speaking response that I can go back and listen to with the student and be able to talk about ways that we could get better with that. Or, okay, how could we get that score up? Maybe we should try some transition words What do you think about these transition words? Could we use some more sophisticated transition words in this response? For this gives us the ability to do that. So it also collects data for you over time as well. And then you can come in and add goals. So we just felt like we needed something else beyond that and beyond what we could create in Flip. Flashlight 360 will create those prompts for you. So one of our goals this year is to take our Wit and Wisdom modules and to create a prompt for each module throughout the year. So each grade would have 4, and you can submit those, to the company. They'll create the speaking prompt and the writing prompt. The students also have their own dashboard where they can see their data and be able to even listen to teacher feedback. So if you have students that aren't reading yet, the teacher can record the feedback, and then the students can listen to that, and then the students can see like what area. So in speaking, it'll break it down into vocabulary, pronunciation, different areas, so that they can really get better at what they're doing. For us, it was very, very powerful for them to be able to use that same prompt multiple times instead of just going on to the next one. So they could click and they could hear their first one, and then they could click and they could listen to the second one, and then they could click on the third, and they're like, oh my gosh, listen, look, I got so much better. And this is the kind of ahas that we saw. Our high school students went crazy over this. So it was really neat, especially for those students that have been at ESL for a long time. For K3, especially like those first, second, third grade, there's handwritten, the writing prompts are handwritten and set up like they are in Access. So where you have a picture and you've got the lines like for the tier A, or it's set up like the tier BC, like with the word bank, so that kids aren't seeing that for the very first time when they sit down to take the Access. For us, it's another source of data, right? And like I said, we're gonna be creating these custom prompts to connect these with our tier 1 instruction. So we're really excited about moving into that next year. So I want to get in and kind of take a look at kind of the end of our data story. So I'm showing you like 3 schools. I'm not showing you all our schools, but these are the 3 schools where we have our highest amount of kids. At Claxton Elementary in 2002, we had 23.5% of our kids met their growth standard, okay? When we went into February, the predicted percentage from TELL was predicting that we would have 46%. Our estimated percentage right now, we haven't gotten our final numbers back yet. I'm still waiting for those final numbers from our data specialists from the state. But just after disaggregating our Access data, we had 55.1% of our kids met their growth standard, right? Notice I'm not looking at testing out. I'm just looking at growth. That is a difference. It's an increase of 31.6%, right? Really significant. Notice Clinton Middle School, the prior year, 7.7%, right? So let's talk about that school. Middle of the year, we're growing like crazy. I had to hire a new teacher middle of the year, and those kids had to test with a teacher they didn't know, right? That had only been there for a few weeks, right? 7.7%. You guys may have some schools like this. We were going into February with this, looking at a 59% is where kids were tested on TELL, right? Now where they actually ended up was 29.4%. So definitely not as high, but still a 21.7% increase. And I'll take that, right? I'll take that. And then finally, Clinton High School, amazing. That 2022, this is where we were seeing all these like unaccompanied youth coming in. We're hiring new people, 18.2% in 2022. Going in to Access, our predicted score was at 65%. We actually were at 55%. So an increase of 36.8%. So the estimated average of students meeting growth standards within these schools, and these schools are all in the same feeder pattern, okay? was 46.5%. In the prior year, it was an average of 16.4%. So we saw an overall gain of 30%. So we were really, really excited about this. Now, we can't really control what happens, like when kids actually test, and we know that they're different. These are different assessments. We've got kids that are having good days when they're sitting down to take their assessment. They're having bad days, but what we want is a good indicator so that we can really take the temperature. Now, I want to say this, is that we've got kids, we have students that came in really, really close. So we had 2 students that came in within 1/10 of a point, and we had 5 kids that came in within 2/10 of a point of being able to meet it. So we had a lot of kids that were just right there. What's so exciting for us now is that we don't have to wait around till the end for this surprise. And let me show you what our platform looked like here at the end of the year, so you can see the full shebang. So notice that we got through progress monitoring number 1. We got through progress monitoring number 2. Teachers are entering their scores. Progress monitoring number 3. Progress monitoring number 4. This is where we captured those scores. That was our prediction moving in. Notice that we don't have anything for 5 and 6. We have just a few because we had a teacher that had a few kids he wanted to, and that's because we were still giving access. So we decided as a team, we're still testing, we're not going to do another test, right? And that's totally fine, right? So in our PLC, we make those decisions together. And then what I did is I just opened up that end of the year diagnostic early so that they could go ahead and start that, when they wanted to mid-April, and then they would have that done just by mid-May. So people could work around into course exams, TCAP, to all of those things. And so gave them a lot of choice there. Notice that academic progress monitoring and goals were still having to be looked at, updated as needed. But here was our final data for this particular teacher, okay? So here was his actual spring access scale score. Here was his actual spring access proficiency level. Prior year, his difference, and then we looked to see if they met that growth standard or not. We did go ahead and indicate whether they tested out, and then if they qualified for tailored services. So this is at the end of the year. This is this whole thing that we were working through this entire school year. And it really kept us, organized and together, so that by the end of the year, we all kind of felt like we had a great collection of data on kids, and then we could really begin to write goals for this next school year coming up. Right, so we could take that end of the year diagnostic. We've got goals moving into the next school year, and then we'll kind of start this process over again. So our next steps for our program, one thing we're going to be looking at is developing student-created language portfolios. I'm really interested in that bulletin that came out from WIDA and how some of these school districts are doing that, and particularly since we are capturing so much and kids are doing so much goal setting and data collection. That's something that I wanted to begin to look at with my team. I want to show you all a few resources, and I'm going to give you a link so that you can access these. So on our Elevate Learning website, I've put in just a bit.ly link here if you want to add it in. If you can't get there for some reason, you can get there from our district website and just go to our Elevate Learning program. But here I've included the Pearson, that booklet that we were looking at that had the sample, so you can kind of see what the pictures look like. It's got a snippet of the concordance table. I have the full concordance table up here if you want to kind of see what that looks like in person. I have a link to our program calendar, the data platform that I showed you all today, as well as a template that if this seems like something that you might be interested in, I've included one that you could go in and begin to populate. Also with that sample access report, and then the proficiency level and standard score chart that I had to create to be able to make those scale scores really work for us are in there as well. Also, our WIDA standards goal bank is in here as well, so you're welcome to come in and copy that. If you are still interested in using key uses, those are available in there as well. So it's been a pleasure to be here. I know it's a lot of information, and there's so many things I wish I could put up there on the screen and show you that I'm just not able to, but like I said, I do have those available if you would like to come and see those. Thank you. Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Did you say you were progress monitoring every 4.5 weeks, or what was the number?
Yeah, so under a prior rule, it was every 4.5. Now that we've gone to every 9.
But were you using TEL every 4.5?
We were using TEL every 4.5 weeks. And we talked as a team what we wanted to do, and I think the consensus is like my folks want to continue to do it monthly because it doesn't take very long, and actually the kids really enjoy it, and they really enjoy tracking their progress. So I think we're going to continue. They were like, they don't want to take their foot off the gas with that.
How long did it take you to put together all that information?
It was, that's what I did last summer. I mean, as far as like that, that data wall and really kind of digging in. But one of the things that was really important for me was developing the methodology for when we sit down as a team, how we're really looking at data, and being able to really begin to work with data, particularly since I had so many new teachers.
And your teachers, your content versus your EL teachers, how did they feel about all that information?
So that's a great question. So the content area teachers would receive a copy of the individual student report. So they weren't, this would have overwhelmed them. This would have been too much. So there's an individual student report that's available, and so the teachers would receive a copy of this report so that they could see growth. And this was something that our teachers loved, right? And they were able to see progress, or they could say, oh no, they dipped down. And it would be like, well, okay, let's think about it. Oh yeah, he was sick that day. It was normally something sort of behavioral or something physically that was going on with the student if they have that drastic drop. But this was also something, when teachers were having conversations, let's say in an RTI team, this was another piece of data that they could take to the table with the ESL teacher, and the content teacher already understood it because they'd already gone over it with the ESL teacher, and they were able to get a good indicator of where kids were. And then when we needed to modify, if we needed to get in and modify the ILP, right? Let's say that they're killing it in reading. They don't need a reader anymore, right? We've got this data. We've got the data from the classroom. This was another piece of data that we could put with the content, the data that they were getting in the content area classroom.
Yes, my teachers are really looking for something to progress monitor. They've been like begging for something, so it's good to see that. But the elephant in the room, what's the price?
That's a great question. So it's $18 a student.
Oh, wow.
And that includes the diagnostic and the progress monitoring. So I think you can just purchase the progress monitoring, but it was like $2 more to get the diagnostics with it. So you get a total of 8 progress monitoring assessments plus the beginning of the year and the end of the year.
Is it administered as a group or individually?
It could be either one. It can be either one. There is I will give you one caveat. There is this one little thing where at the beginning, as it's calibrating, the kids have to take the volume down and back up. And like after you give it a couple times, you figure out like that's the thing you have to be watching for. But once the kids learn how to do that calibration, which is really quick, they're so good with technology, they get that. Now there are some kids that we will continue to do individually because our goal is to get accurate data. So if I know this little guy is going to be all over the place with a group, I'm going to test him individually, but it can definitely be done in a group.
it looked like that you were doing the TEL with middle schoolers and high schoolers too. How
Yes.
did they like the program? Because I've only seen it with elementary students, so I'm just seeing, was it like Access? Was it still predictive for them? It looks like, according to your data, it was.
Yes.
And like, does the platform change to elementary, or was it too kiddish for them?
No, it does change. And so it adapts, and the tasks, adapt as well. You'll see kind of the writing prompts look different. And our middle and high school kids love it. Yeah.
Second question, the Flashlight 360, was that lined toward Access as well, or were those prompts coming out of thin air, or?
They are aligned. And for those of you all that use Imagine Learning, these folks left Imagine Learning and started this company because they saw a need for expressive language practice. And so they have set these tasks up to look like Access. Now we've given them some feedback on some ways they can, strengthen them a little bit. But that's one thing I really like about them is they're real open, and they'll do the custom work for us. So, that's something that's really nice where you're not necessarily just stuck. But it's really difficult when you're creating those tasks by yourself, like a 9-12 language of science task for speaking and writing, and to create those, that's really tricky. Especially to be able to create multiple ones over the year. And so it's nice to be able to have a bank.
Is TEL still tablet only?
We use it with an app on our Chromebooks. So we've got touch. You do have to have a touch screen, but we have the Chromebook with the touch screen application. And so they do have to be able to drag and drop.
Okay. I don't think we're one-to-one with laptops, but I don't think they have a drag and drop feature or touchscreen feature.
Did the technology work well on the Chromebooks? When I talked to them, they said they didn't.
That's a great question. So I was really nervous about it. And, I was like, can I get my money back? Like if this doesn't work. We had a few glitches on the first run, but once the kids went through the first cycle and it downloaded, we didn't have many issues at all. When we did, it would be like that one kid on that one computer. So it was very individual, but it wasn't like big groups of students. So overall, we were really happy with it.
Right, and then did you do the progress monitoring? How often did you do that once you had done the beginning of the year?
So yeah, after the beginning of the year, we did it once a month. Yeah, and we had that in our calendar, and then the teachers would have just that week window, to do it when they wanted to.
I noticed you had one kid whose TEL score at the beginning of the year exceeded the goal for the end of the year.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how you dealt with those. Which is kind of an anomaly. It's probably not something that came up often. But how did you talk through goal setting with that kind of student?
Yeah. So sometimes they would meet their goal right at the get-go, and we didn't want them just to take their foot off the goal or off the gas, and then sometimes they didn't score as well at the end. And so this was something that our teachers were just conference with them one-on-one, and they also have other pieces of data. This is one piece, but then they also had Flashlight where they could go, well, let's look at some of your Flashlight responses. These were really great. Another thing that we also had to look at is we know our kids, and we also did a lot of intentional grouping, for testing. So if we knew that we had kids that were just blowing it off, we would put those kids kind of in a group where we could test those kids. Another thing that we did for speaking is we purchased those trifold science fair boards, so that for middle school and high school, so that the kids really had this sense of personal space, and they would face the wall. And that way the ESL teacher could monitor very easily. We put them in a semicircle, but for the students, their experience was being in a real individual space. And we would do that even when they were working on Flashlight. But some of those were, we would get in and we would look really specifically at the subtest, because it'll give you those subtests. So it might be it might have been the writing, and then you go back and go, okay, let's talk about that writing. Well, didn't understand it, or I didn't like typing on it this way. And then we could say, well, let's look at some other writing that we have. So we were able to keep it positive. Really important for us going in was that being able to celebrate at the February and then at the end of the year. So if we had to dig deep to find something, but then also to say, what are the next things? How can we get better next time?